Hello, everybody. Today we want to thank Mr. Norman Smiley, an international superstar in our presence today, for venturing up from Miami, Florida to Charlotte, North Carolina to spend a few minutes with us and our fans here at High Spots. The first question that we ask everybody sitting in your chair is, how did you get started in the wrestling business?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. I grew up in England, and the wrestling scene was embedded there and due to my dad, because my dad was a huge wrestling fan, and this was in the 70s, and every Saturday afternoon I would sit down and watch the wrestling with him, never dreaming in a million years that I'd become a wrestler. So basically the seed was embedded at that point in my life.
Who were some of your favorites when you were in England?
Oh Lord, guys, that's Big Daddy, Giant Haystacks, Fit Finley. I know Fit's gonna hate me for saying that, but Fit Finley, Johnny Saint, Mark Rocco, who used to wrestle as the Black Tiger in Japan, Tibor Zakash, Les Kelly. That's a bunch of old time guys.
Well, what actually got you initiated in the wrestling?
I don't know what it was that really sparked me into it. I think it was just the showmanship. Even though at that point I believed that it was real, but just some of the wrestlers just had a particular charisma about them, and which interested me a lot. So I just figured at that point that wrestling was something that I would want to get into. It wasn't specifically something that I thought I would get into. It was like a childhood dream, like most kids would want to be a fireman or a football player or a baseball player. In the back of my mind, I always thought pro wrestling wouldn't be a bad thing for me to get into.
So how did you start getting your training? Did you go
my parents got divorced, and my mother didn't want to see my dad, didn't want to have like a coincidental meeting in a mall or anything like that, so she figured the Atlantic Ocean would be a big enough gap between them. So she moved to Miami with myself and my two younger brothers, and I went to Miami Beach High School. And I was training in a gym, and there was a local wrestler there who told me that he was a wrestler. And he happened to have a ring in his backyard. So I went to his house, and he taught me the basics, the tie-up and the headlock. And he was actually taught by Boris Malenkos, the father of Dean Malenkos and Joe Malenkos. So he took me to Tampa, and I met Larry, Dean, and Joe, and Mo. And they taught me everything I know. The submission style that I got into, the wrestling aspect from the American standpoint, the European stuff. Both Dean and Joe were just phenomenal in whatever they did. Joe was more of the submission guy, and Dean was the technical. And I just thought Dean was just a god. And the funny thing about Dean is, Dean was always as good as what he is now, but he never got a break up until a few years ago. So I just absorbed everything that he taught me. So that was in '86 that I initially began to the regimen of training every day, in the squats and the jogging and the holds. And it was some point in that year that I really felt that maybe I would be lucky enough and have the talent enough to make a living from it.
What were some of the other names that were passing through the Malenkos camp?
The school at that time there, Chris Champion, Mark Starr, Barry Horowitz, who else was at that time? Oh Lord. Yeah. Slips my mind. It slips my mind, but I know he had a hand in training Ricky Steamboat, Bob Orton. This is Boris Malenkos I'm talking about. Who was it he trained? I think he trained one of the Demolition, Bill Eadie. I believe he had a hand in training him, and he was just a phenomenal guy. And not just saying as a wrestler, but just as a human being, he was just great. So I was grateful for him, and grateful for the time that Joe and Dean took out to teach me the stuff that they knew. So.
How was because back then I guess wrestling schools weren't located in every city like they are now. But
no. Every Joe, right? The school was in a little town outside of Tampa called Bartow, and I would make the drive up from Miami every weekend to go up there and just learn, because I just thought that it was amazing that I was able to learn from guys that was an official pro. It wasn't some guy who watched a couple of tapes on TV and figured out that he knew how to do the moves. So each week I'd make the drive and I'd go up there, and it was a school. I mean, we'd warm up, we'd stretch, and then they show us the psychology. They teach us that part of it, and then the holds, and it was something that you had to graduate from one step in order to take on the other step. Mm-hmm. And it was a great time. It was a very, very great time, and it was a foundation for what I have now, because a lot of what I've learned in the time that I spent in Japan and Mexico, thank God that I was able to learn that, because it came in useful. My WCW days, the wiggle, that was just... The only thing that I can compare it to is a good-looking girl who goes to college for 4 years to become an accountant. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden she finds out that she's sexy, and now she's a stripper making 5 times what she could ever make as an accountant. So, even though I had the wrestling background and the knowledge and everything, that wasn't what was getting me over. It was the wiggle and the dancing and the screaming. So. Mm-hmm.
Can you remember your first match?
Yes, in West Palm Beach, some guy called, I think it was Wolfman Jack, and I beat him up. Not intentionally, but I was just scared out of my mind, mm-hmm. stiff as a board, green, didn't know what I was doing, and I whacked him a couple of times, which I told him that I was apologetic about afterwards.
Who were some of the senior guys around that area that kind of taught you?
Well, the first company that I started working for was Championship Wrestling from Florida in '86. Ron Bass was there. Lucha started about the same time. Ron Simmons, Barry Horowitz was there, wrestling as Jack Hart at the time. Barry Windham.
Who promoted this territory?
Kareem O'Hallead. This was Championship Wrestling from Florida. The Gordon Soley and Buddy Colt, Mike Graham was there involved at the time. In fact, his father was the one that owned and ran the office at that time. Mm-hmm. And just being around those guys, you just absorbed. And I was a young kid, I didn't know a thing, and I would just sit in the locker room and just speechless, and just listen and look and observe. I remember having a match one time with Ron Bass in West Palm Beach. It was a house show match, and we locked up and everything. And Ron Bass, as I'm sure you know, his style was very slow, methodic. It was more kick and punch. And I got a little cocky, wanted to get an arm drag there, and he's like, push me, just pie-faced me. He's like, just listen. So that was a learning process there, where I knew in order to have a match, it's 2 guys working together. I'm not working for myself. We have to be there together to support each other, to have a good product, and that's the definition of a wrestling match. Mm-hmm. So those were some of the guys. Who else was there? Billy Jack Haynes came through. Wahoo McDaniels was there. Yeah, he was booking at one time. Kevin Sullivan, Mark Lewin, King Curtis, he came through. Rocky Johnson, he was there for a while. So just, and at that time Florida was a hotbed for wrestling, so it was a popular place for a lot of the guys to come through and get their suntans.
So did you have a full-time job at this time, or were you trying to make a full-time?
I just got out of high school. I didn't attend college, and just bumming around, training in gyms and bouncing a little bit, fitness and strength, all the stuff that a struggling wrestler does in order to survive. And it wasn't until, I bombed around in Florida, and it wasn't until '87 that I was approached about going to Japan, which was a guy that was very close to Dean Malenkos and his brother and his dad, who happened to be the son-in-law of Carl Gotch. Mm-hmm. So he asked me if I was interested in going to Japan. But he explained to me and made it very clear that it wasn't the same style that I was accustomed to seeing and doing here in the States. So being young and ambitious, I said, of course, whatever, because I just wanted to get my feet in the door and establish a name for myself. So after that first session, I had second thoughts, because inside of my gums were bleeding and my tendons, and just getting pulled apart and stretched and twisted in every way possible that a human body wasn't supposed to be. And I even trained a couple of times with Carl Gotch, who's a god in Japan. He's just a household name there too. And it was a time that I was beginning to question if I really wanted to be involved in that type of pro wrestling, because it was just so physical and it was complicated, the holds and the kicking aspect, and it wasn't what I'd been taught up to that point. Like for example, a high spot wasn't tackle, drop down, leapfrog. It was 2 slaps to the face, a kick to the jaw, and a German suplex. So it was just something that was totally foreign. But I went ahead and did it and enjoyed it. And that was really my first step to getting to establishing a name, was in Japan for a company called Universal Wrestling Federation. And they had stars Takada, Maeda, Nieto, Anjo, and a lot of these guys are still wrestling now. I know that Takada just recently had 2 shoot fights with Hicks and Gracie. Didn't fare too well, but he's still a dangerous man. And I know that Maeda, who was the star of the show, had a big shoot which was famous with Ricky Choshu. And I know that him and Andre the Giant had a confrontation too. So a lot of those guys were legitimate bad asses, but they knew in order to get over that they had to change the style of wrestling that the average fan was accustomed to seeing. And the funniest thing was, my first trip there was in '88, and their head office was no bigger than this room. They had 6 guys that was wrestling in the company and myself, and it was the most successful wrestling company in the world at that time. They would sell out every building within record time. The merchandising was flying off the shelf. And I just felt honored and special to be a part of something that big. So,
and how many fights did you have in there? Because it wasn't like 5 days a week. Like
no. I literally would go there for 10 days. I'd be there for a week, training. Because even though I was training in Tampa with Sammy and Carl Gotch and Dean Malenkos, they wanted to tweak up my style and just tighten up certain aspects as far as the holds. Because at that point, they were creating the illusion that it was a 100% shoot, which it wasn't. It was a 3/4 shoot, and the fans knew that this was real and this was a work. So I had to learn every aspect of the holds and how to apply it, when to apply it, how to apply it, and where to apply it. So I would spend a week there just training, and we would have one match, and I'd come home. So it was just, and I went there, I believe it was 9 times for those guys. And it was just fun. My first pay-per-view was actually in Japan. I wrestled a guy who lives in Miami. His name is Bart Bale. He's a karate guy, and they brought in different guys from Europe, and they had what they call mixed matches, where they would put a kickboxer against a wrestler, a boxer against Takada, who could do anything and everything. And it was great. It was very, very successful. And as I said, I just felt honored that I was a part of that.
Who were some of the United States wrestlers that were over there at the time?
Let me see. Well, the most famous one is Shamrock. Gary Albright, I know, went a few times, but he went after me, and he wrestled for Takada's group, which they call UWFI. They had a couple of local guys from Tampa, a guy called Mac Roosh. I don't remember anybody.
I think he worked the show with Bob Backlund.
Bob Backlund was there, yeah. Bob was there in December. I remember, well, it was December of '89. He had a match with Takada, and I had always heard up to that point that Backlund was a shooter. And when I met him, he was a great amateur, but he wasn't a shooter. And basically, any wrestler knows that an amateur feeds a shooter. So everything that an amateur's been taught to do, to sit out and certain holes, it just feeds the shooter. All the shooter has to do is just sit there and wait, and you feed yourself to him, and it'll just hook you. And at that point, I'm not sure if Bob felt that he was going to have another comeback, but he wanted to protect his name and his image in Japan, and he wasn't willing to do the job for Takada. So, they did it the old-fashioned way in the gym. And I tell you one thing, Bob, I love him to death, but he found a whole new respect for Takada after he got through with it. And the actual match itself, Bob and I were sharing the same locker room. I told him, I said, Bob, if you remember anything, just remember to keep your hands up at all times, because, these guys that come at you with the kicks and the slaps. And they rang the bell. He stepped out to the side of the ring. The bell was still ringing. Takada caught him with 2 kicks. Bam, bam. His eye was popped up and his nose was bleeding. But you have to take your lumps and your bruises, I guess, and learn the hard ways. My dad would always tell me, if you can't hear, you must learn to feel. And Bob, he felt that night. So,
What was your feeling? Like, the promotion was so huge. Did you feel like, hey, I can come to the United States and
I felt at that time that knowing Vince I've never met him, but knowing the type of businessman that he is, that he was well aware of everything that was happening in Japan, in Europe, in Mexico. And I thought at that time that the exposure that I was getting there would have been enough for me to make a name for myself here. But as I said, I'm going back to '88, and now I realized that McMahon could care less if you can do a German suplex or this or that. He wants a guy who can put S's in C's, and that basically boils down to a person having charisma and having some color and having a personality. Being a tough guy or weak guy or homosexual or whatever the case may be, doesn't matter. As long as you have that charisma, that's what he's looking for, and that came apparent to me. That's never been more apparent to me than what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Going back to that strong style, and
Yeah.
it still exists today. Is that something you'd ever be interested in going back to, or is
I don't know. You get older, and now the most important thing to me now is not getting hurt and getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
And believe me, I took my lumps and bruises, teeth knocked loose, and bloody noses. Thank God I never had anything broken, but I was there once, and they were training, and they killed a guy in the ring. He took a kick to the head. He took a bad fall, and a week later he died. So when you say strong style, that's exactly what it was. It was very, very strong, very strong.
And then the mentality in wrestling is not to hurt your opponent. You're working together. But
Exactly.
how is it looked at as from that same standpoint as strong style wrestling?
Well, they basically tell you protect yourself at all times, and as soon as you step into the ring, you have to be aware of what you're getting yourself into. What can happen, it's important too that you're aware of the style of your opponent. Like, I was always on my toes with Takeda because I knew he was a great kicker. Kick you with either foot, anytime, any place in the ring. And there were certain guys that I could be a little bit more at ease with, like a Fujiwara, who's an older guy. I mean, great holes, but he couldn't kick or wouldn't kick. So, but they wanted that aggressive, physical style because that was what was selling their product, and that's what they wanted. And at times, you got caught. If you were on your toes, you were able to block it or duck it. It was good, but if not, you got caught.
There wasn't a large amount of time between your first experience with the NWA or WCW and the Starrcade. Between that, what was going on in Japan and that, who brought you into the NWA?
Actually, there is a friend of mine, and if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here now. His name is Alex Marvez. He writes for the Sun Sentinel in Miami, Fort Lauderdale. And I've been friends with him at that point for a couple of years, and he told me that they were having a pay-per-view in St. Louis. It was a pay-per-view that they were going to have a tag team tournament called the Pat O'Connor something. So he told me that he had a friend who was working in the office at that time with World Championship Wrestling, and they wanted an English guy because they already had Chris Adams.
Mm-hmm.
So he literally hounded me for 2 weeks to get a tape together, and I kept telling him, Alex, they're not going to use me. I've tried, I've called them already. They're not going to use me. And the only reason I put the tape together was to stop him from calling me and harassing me. I put the tape together, I send it to him, he sends it to them, and I get a phone call from, I believe it was Jim Ross. I'm not sure now, but I thought it was a rib. So I'm like, yeah, Jim, okay. and he's very professional and articulate, and he's telling me that he's seen the tape and they're having a tournament, and they would like me to be involved, and that my partner would be Chris Adams. So once I arrived in St. Louis, I thought this was a chance that I've finally been waiting for. After spending so much time in Japan, I'm finally here in the U.S. and I've got my break. Then I was told that I'm going to be wrestling a team from Mexico, who happened to be Conan and Rey Mysterio's uncle. And Conan, who's a student of wrestling, he knows everything that's happening, he knows every wrestler, every style. He was aware that I was wrestling in Japan at that time, and he asked me to do a series of different high spots and combinations, which was totally foreign to me. I've been wrestling in Mexico for years, and half the stuff they do there it makes no sense. So he asked me to do these moves. I did them, and he was happy with the match. He knew of my history in Japan, and he asked me if I was interested in going to Mexico. And up to that point, I always had the preconceived notion that, you know, there's no money in Mexico. It's dirty, it's filthy, it's dangerous, which at some points it is dangerous. But that's how I initially got my start. Through Alex Marbez helping me to get the show in St. Louis on the pay-per-view, and meeting Conan, who's became a major player in my life, because he took me to Mexico and later on helped me get my contract with the World Championship Wrestling.
Did they tell you going into the Starrcade event that it was going to be a one-shot deal and there wasn't a chance to?
Well, you know, they flavor it up. They said, well, needless to say, Norman, this can open up doors and so on and so forth. And I spoke to a couple of guys in the office at that time, and Terry Taylor was one, Barry Windham was one, and I thought the match went well. I thought that I showcased some of what I was able to do, and I did the job without any squabble or quarrel or anything. And afterwards I made, you know, the calls, and I've realized now, once you make a few calls and people say, well, you know, you need to talk to him, or you need to talk to them, or call back tomorrow, they're messing you around. So that's when I took Conan up on his proposal and went to Mexico.
Okay, we had discussed this earlier, that you had never had any experience with Lucha Libre, and you
No.
didn't speak any Spanish, so
No.
talk about jumping from style that you had been comfortable with and going to Mexico.
Funny thing about Mexico was that 95% of the matches are six-mans. So and 90% of the matches are three falls. You know, the heels get one fall, the babyface will get the other one, and whoever goes up in the third will get that fall. And I remember my first night there, and business was unbelievable at that time. I went there in January of '91, and I debuted in Arena, Mexico. And I'm in the locker room. I'm going over the match in my 2 or 3 words of Spanish that I know, and the guys are telling me the limited English of what they know. And the funny thing is, I'm sitting there, and you know, I'm going over the match, and the guys don't have the hoods on, the masks on.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, I'll do that with you, and I'll do that with you, and okay, you know. I get in the ring, I'm like, well, who's who? So it was one of those things where it was a trial and error. It was once again, it was a totally different experience, completely different than the experience that I had in Japan and here in the States. And you know, the fast pace. They work on the other side, which I had experience on doing that from working with Dean. So you can arm drag on the right side or the left side. A lot of the stuff they do makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And it's 3 falls. So I could have 3 high spots with each guy, a high spot with each guy, then I would have to remember 3 different falls. It was a lot of stuff to remember that was totally foreign to me. Mm-hmm. So there was a huge mental aspect there, just in order to remember everything.
Who were some of the stars at that time in the early '90s when you started?
The Mexican guys that were on top. In general, there was Mil Mascaras, who still is to a certain point. Rayo de Jalisco, Atlantis, Porky, Canek, Dos Caras. Kamala was there, who was a foreigner. That's when I met my good friend Vampiro. He started there at the same time. Chris Adams came down. The Moondogs were there at one point. Haku was there, and just a bunch of guys. Eddie Guerrero passed through. Jericho was there. Chris Benoit. Val Venus came in at a later stage, but it was a passing ground for a lot of the guys now that have established names here and who are also stars here.
What was the schedule like down there in Mexico?
Hectic. I was working, I would say, a minimum of 8 times, between 8 and 12 times a week, many times doing doubles and triples. I remember my first triple shot I did was in a town called Merida, and all these shots you have to catch a plane. So work in Merida, wrestle in Mexico City, and the final shot was in Monterrey. So it was literally wrestle, run to the locker room, grab a towel, just dry off, grab my bag, and run to the airport. And it was just hectic. And it wore me down because coming from the States and being conscious of training and what I ate and my diet and so forth, and going to Mexico, as you well know, you know, the quality of the food isn't the same as it is here. And there's been a couple of nights where I just collapsed, clutching my stomach. So it was that, coupled with the fact that I was constantly on the go. You know, it wasn't strange for me to put in a 40-hour week on a bus, or 50 hours, because the transportation is just brutal. So a lot of times we'd have to make on buses, and it was just hectic. You'd do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Sometimes you could work 10, 12 days without a day off.
Was the money fair to the foreigners?
The money at that point was very, very good for a guy who didn't make anything. You know what I mean? For a single guy who didn't have any responsibilities, you know, I wasn't married, and it was great. It was great. So, you know, my biggest concern at that point was being with Vampiro, and both of us trying to get laid every night. So it was good. It was good.
Let's talk about the first major feud that you had in Mexico. Can you remember that?
They brought me in when the first time I went there, I was a face, a baby face, and they had me involved in several matches with a guy called Pure Roth, who was a big heel there at that time. But the biggest feud that I had there would have been against Vampiro. Him and I, we tagged up as faces, and then after a while I turned on him, and it was just unbelievable. I mean, the only thing that I can compare it to was watching like the regrowth of Elvis Presley or the Beatles, because he was just a phenomenon. And I've been in cars with him where literally there's so many people around you, specifically girls, and they just rock in the car and you fear for your life. I mean, literally fear for your life. But he was the biggest feud I had there. I had a feud with Porky, with Rayo, who else? And Negro Casas. But Vampiro was by far the biggest.
And how did you get the name Black Magic?
Black Magic was it was one of those things where I was sitting down and I said I need a catchy name, you know. And originally I came up with El Dorado. I don't know why. I must be the brother in me with the Cadillacs. But and then it just hit me, just Black Magic. So it came from nowhere. It wasn't, you know, a name that I picked out of a book or something specific happened. It just hit me.
You had already mentioned both Conan and Vampiro's name. Yeah. Who's the bigger star?
Oh, it depends who you ask.
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
No, in all honesty, Conan took me to Mexico. At the time that he brought me there, he was also in the same group that I was in with Vampiro. I would say within a year he left and started AAA. And I would compare AAA as being the WWF at that time, and the group that I was with was like World Championship Wrestling, whereas AAA was more the marketing machine, and they got Conan on several talk shows like a Johnny Carson, sports shows, just making appearances. And I would say that between the both of them, they were equivalent to Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair at the time. They were both huge stars, and I feel that was the reason why there was so much heat between them at that time, because they both wanted the same thing, you know, and they hated each other. I mean, hated each other. There was a couple of times where I physically had to. I remember one time in the Pink Zone, which is a tourist district in Mexico City, where Art Barr and myself had to physically separate them because people were gathering around, and I thought it was going to come to blows. But they both wanted the same thing. They were both driven, both very, very creative, and both pioneers as far as what they were doing within wrestling to make themselves a bit different. That Vampiro with the makeup and the and his attire and his clothing and the style, and he would never talk about going to the gym to train or learning different holds. He was talking about how many girls he had the night before, which was something totally different there at that time, because in Mexico the wrestler is you know, is like the old boxer here, you know. Well, I did my road work this morning, I ran 8 miles, and then I hit the bag, and I did this, and people. So it was just something totally new with Vampiro, just going there and telling the fans what he was doing in his social time. And Conan was pretty much the same thing, where he was driven, and he's very, how can I say, he's very, very, very ambitious, Carlos. Whatever he does, you know, he wants it to be the best that he's able to do. He's generous to a fault. I mean, he's helped me. If it wasn't for Conan, we would have never heard of Juventud Guerrero, La Parker, Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, Super Crazy. I mean, all these Mexican stars that were struggling in Mexico at that time. He made it a point because he saw talent in them to bring them here and make them stars.
Do you know any to the credence to the truth that Vampiro was offered the spot on the soap opera that Conan ended up taking?
I don't know about that.
No?
I don't know. Vampiro says a lot of things, and who knows? I don't know. I know about that, and that's the truth. I don't know about that.
I know a lot of people that are watching this interview probably didn't know about Norman Smiley before the days in WCW,
Yeah.
but in fact, you won the most prestigious title in Mexico.
Yeah.
You want to tell us the
That
story?
was, in case, for those of you viewing this tape, EMLL, which is Empresa Mexicana de Lucha Libre, is the oldest wrestling company in the world. I believe this year they're going to be 69 years old or 79 or 78 years old. But I won the title, I believe it was in 92, I think it was. We had a tournament and I beat Rayo de Jalisco in the finals. And that was an honor. I mean, I was like, you know, I'm thinking I'm par now with my idols like Ric Flair and Harley Race. Like, you know, I'm up there that my name is going to be, well, not mentioned in the same breath as those guys, but as far as Mexico goes, I'm the world champ, and it was an honor.
Was it a shock to you? Because I know that watching it, you probably thought it was either Vampiro or Rayo.
It was a shock. Vampiro at that point, he didn't need it. He was so over that he didn't need it. And I felt that the office at that time felt that if I had it, because we had so much heat at that time, that we could generate so much more business with him trying to take it from me, more so than me trying to take it from him. Which happened, and it was very, very successful. But it was a tournament, as I said, and the final two guys was myself and Rayo. And I just figured that he was gonna get it because he's such a bitch. He's a crybaby. So, and I know that he was in the boss's ears. So I just figured that he would get it. And I was flabbergasted when they told me, "No, Norman, we're giving the belt to you because we feel that you can do better business than Rayo, because being a foreigner and with the feud that I had with Vampiro at the time too." So that was an honor.
Can you explain to people how Lucha Libre relates to the culture and how it's viewed to the fans, how it differs from pro wrestling here in the States?
Well, first and foremost, the biggest difference is the mask. Vampiro and myself have always said the boys wear masks because the majority of the guys are cab drivers. No, but they have the mask, and the mask is serious business. I mean, that's a wrestler's personality. That's his character. It's taken very seriously. Whenever a wrestler makes an appearance as a wrestler, if it's in an appearance, if it's in a dinner or a wrestling match, he always has the mask on. Always, always, always. And the three first names that come to mind that constantly have the mask on: El Santo, the son, Canek, and Mil Mascaras. I knew Mil for maybe 8 or 9 months before I ever saw him with that mask off. He would have the match, take out a mask, go into the shower, be in the corner, shower, take off one and put on another and come out. They just hide their identity. You know, and I guess as time goes on now, a lot of the guys, they don't take it as seriously, and as soon as they get in the locker room, you know, they take off the mask. But the mask is a big deal there, and that's why when they have the mask versus mask or mask versus hair matches, that they are very popular, because everybody wants to see the identity of the wrestler behind the mask. And over the years, they've had some unbelievable matches. One that comes to mind is Cien Caras versus Rayo de Jalisco, where they had so many people. I was told they actually had more people outside than they had inside the building, and it was 18,000. and parts of the walls of the building were collapsing because they had so many people that were just pushing and pulling, and they had people in the streets. In fact, they put up a big screen in the street, and that just shows you the strength of those matches. When you have two top guys that are going against each other for either hair versus hair or mass versus mass, it's a guaranteed sellout, guaranteed.
The only one that we've found is you had a hair versus hair match against Fiera.
You know everything, don't you? Yeah, that was in...
I'm sure we're going to pull up clips of this match, so if you can just lead us into it. And
that was in December of '94. I'd been up to that point in Mexico for 4 years. Business had declined. There was a new president in there, and the previous president, whose name is Salinas, left office, and by coincidence, as soon as he left, that peso shot up from 3 pesos to $1 to 9. And I'm sure you know, because you go there often. And the office at that time wasn't able to pay me what I was making because the valuation of the peso. Also, they had opposition now in AAA, and they were taking wrestling on a very different route. So a lot of the average fans who were taken in by the spectacles and the girls with the TNA and the lights and so on and so forth were more into the AAA product more so than ours. So and plus I was tired. I'd been there for 4 years, and I was just tired, so I wanted to come home, and I had spoken to the office and arranged a hair match with La Fiera, who everybody thought I was going to win because La Fiera drops his hair at least 2-3 times a year. So it was a big shock.
Still does.
Yeah, he still does. So it was a shock when I lost. And
did you get to pick your opponent, or?
Yes. I wanted it somebody who it could have went either way. I could have gotten Vampiro, and but I knew that the fans wouldn't buy it because he wasn't going to drop his hair. But I do remember in '92 I had a chance to do it with him, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Norman, don't do it," because he felt that I would drop down. I spoke to Conan too, and he told me the same thing, and they offered me about $15,000 to lose my hair that night, and I told him no. And when I did it last time, I didn't get nowhere near that. So
I know here in the States, if you were to tell Vince McMahon, no, I'm not going to do a storyline, it'll probably cost you your job.
yeah.
But do you know how much of defense you have against that and losing your hair, losing your mask if you're in Mexico?
With me, I called my own shots. Paco Alonso, who's the owner, he was always, he would always come to me and ask me what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. But to this day, I still don't know how the lower guys do it, because I know a lot of times I'll have a mask versus mask, and I'll pull the guy aside and say, well, you're going up or down, and they don't know. So I don't know if they tell them or if they can't favor me. I don't know, because I'm not buying tickets, so I don't know why they can't favor me. But I know that lower guys don't have as much say, but the top guys like Atlantis or Negro Casas, Vampiro, we basically say, listen, I want to do this. I'd like to do it with him. I'd like to do it on this date, and this is how I'd like to do it. And as long as it's not a stupid finish, I'm pretty sure they're flexible enough to say, okay, we can do it that way.
Did they ever talk about when they brought you to Mexico, starting off with a mask?
No, never. Which it wouldn't have made sense, because I'm the only black guy in Mexico. You know what I mean? So if you see a black guy in a restaurant, there's 20 odd million people there. It's like, hey, that's black magic. So it wouldn't have made sense. And I know at that point too, Conan had his mask, and there was nobody else in Mexico that had his build. And I would be with him in a restaurant, and people say, okay, if he's a luchador or wrestler, and the other guy's built like one, it's got to be Conan. So. No, they never approached me about that.
You had talked about that you had an offer to leave Consejo for AAA at one time.
Yeah. Well, basically I didn't go because I knew that I had security in the Consejo. As I mentioned, they'd been there, at that point they were there for 64 years or 65 years. And the difference is that Paco Alonso owns his arenas. He owned Arena Mexico. He owned another one that was called a Pista Revolution, which was a 10-minute drive. He owns the Coliseo, and on all 3 of these arenas, it's within a 20-minute drive. He has another building in Puebla. He has one in Acapulco, one in Guadalajara. So his cost as far as putting on a show wasn't as much as AAA, because they had to get the venue, bring in the lighting, this and that, the ring, and all kinds of stuff, where Paco Alonso didn't have that. So even if he wasn't pulling in as many people, his overhead wasn't as much, and that was something that I considered. I was making good money. I was happy. I was a world champion. They wanted me to make the jump with the belt, and I've always felt that I'm a straight shooter, and I'm an honest guy, and I wouldn't want to do something to somebody that I wouldn't want done to myself, and I couldn't see myself jumping with the belt to embarrass Paco Alonso after he thought enough of me to give me the belt. Not to mention, I had to leave a $3,000 deposit for the belt too. So.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, but that was irrelevant, because I was told by a source who I will not name that the $3,000 deposit would have been reimbursed if I decided to go. But you know, as I said, Paco Alonso thought enough of me to give me the belt to make me his champion. Who I believe that I was one of the very few foreign champions up to that point. So I didn't want to screw him, and you know, because. If I would have done that then, I wouldn't be able to work there now. You know that saying about blowing up bridges? So I'm happy and glad that I didn't do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm drawing a blank here.
Art bar.
Oh yeah. Let's just start with that.
Somebody American.
Yeah. Art bar. We met in Mexico. I think it was in '92. He came down. Also arranged by Conan. He brought him down, and my first impression with him was like I was talking to Vampiro. I was like, this guy from Portland is crazy. You know, just crazy, outgoing, and just crazy. He was just art would work you. I mean, even though you were one of the boys, you did the same thing he did. He would try and work you. I mean, you know, for example, the building in Acapulco would hold 5,000 or 6,000. You know, he would tell me he put 10,000 in there. It's like, Art, the building only holds 5. Oh, brother, but they bought tickets to listen. I was so over there, and you know, we created a friendship there that was special, because we were the only foreigners there, and it was a good thing that we liked each other, between myself, Vampiro, and Love Machine. Not so much Conan at that point, because Conan left and went to AAA. But Art Bar would spend many nights in my apartment, and we would just sit there and talk, and he would spit his tobacco all over my wooden floor after it was clean, because he loved to chew his tobacco. But you know, he was I guess he was brought up in a different era in wrestling, and he was exposed to different things that I wasn't exposed to in Vampiro, as far as the things that he was doing. And many times we'd sit him down and say, Art, you can't, you know, this is wrong, you can't do it. Chris Jericho included would sit him down and say, hey, you know, you can't do this, you can't take that, it's not right, it's not healthy. And I'll never forget the night. It was a Wednesday. I was at home, and Conan called me from the States, and he told me that he goes, Art's dead. And I thought he was joking. I said, what are you crazy? I just saw him. It was during Thanksgiving. I think it was in '94, but it was a Wednesday. And I said, he said, and I could just tell by the tone of his voice. He said, Norman, he said, Art's dead. He died this morning. He was home in Portland. I said, how? Why? I mean, I just saw him because he left. He was there that Sunday, and he told me he was going home to spend time with his family. He had a little boy, Dexter, which he adored. And he was going there to spend some time with his family, and that he was coming back. And he asked me if there was anything special that I wanted, and I asked him to bring me back a pumpkin pie, which was surprising to me, because as cheap as Art was, he never offered to do anything. And I remember the final night that I was with him, it was myself and Chris Jericho and him in his apartment, and we were there until I think it was 3 or 4 in the morning. And already he was gone. He was drowsy and he was sleeping, and he woke up, and Chris and I were just sitting there watching tapes and drinking Art's beer. And Art, he woke up and he just, you two bastards don't have a home to go to, you're still here. And that was the last time I saw him, and it was just one of those things. Up to today, I still can't believe And I called Vampiro, who was in Acapulco, and I told him that Art had died, and you know, the same thing, he couldn't believe it. And it really didn't hit me that he had passed away until they had the moment of silence, which we had to go, all the wrestlers go up into the ring, and they announced that Art Barr has passed on. And you know, in Mexico they're very, very religious, and they say a prayer, and you know, they wish him well on the other side, and they do the, you know, the minute of clapping, and that's when I just broke down. It was the first time in years I cried, and I looked at, I couldn't even look at Vampiro because he's crying and I'm crying, and it was sad because it was a tournament that night or something, and I remember I was crying in the ring, and the wrestlers left the ring, and I couldn't go back because I had to just stay in the ring and wrestle, and I was wrestling La Fiera. And you know, he told me, you know, we're locking up. I'm just sniffing and I'm wiping the tears away. And he says to me, Norman, that's the life. Life goes on. You know, so it was sad because you know, we grew up there as men, as young men in Mexico, and as young stars to be, or young talent to be, and just sharing so many different things with Vampiro and Conan and Art. And it was just sad because I know if he was alive, he'd be here with us now. He'd be with Vince McMahon for sure, because he was just he just had so much potential to offer, and he brought so much to Mexico. Growing up in a wrestling family with his dad Sandy Barr and his brother Jesse, and just hanging around wrestlers his entire life. So, and I learned a lot from him, just from his mannerisms and how to handle promoters. He gave me a saying once. He said, Norman, get paid in your street clothes, meaning don't even get changed until you got paid. So, you know, it's a big loss. I lost a friend. Pro wrestling lost a hell of a talent. You know, his mother lost a great son, and you know, it's a loss. And and there were several guys that took it hard. I know Eddie took it hard because Eddie Guerrero took it hard because that was his partner. Mm-hmm. And I think Eddie was the only guy from Mexico to go to the funeral. I'm not sure if Conan went, but you know, it was just a big loss, and a tragic and unnecessary loss, because premature, and it was silly, and it was something that you know, we saw coming, but I guess we didn't want to confront it. But you know, we did in a certain way, and we didn't. But we should have been more stern and more firm and say, all right, you know, don't do this shit anymore because it's not right. You're going to get hurt. Mm-hmm. And he did, and it's sad.
Was Eddie just as wild as he was at that time?
Eddie's wild. Eddie's wild in the sense that Eddie's a hothead, like all the Guerreros are, you know. And I'm sure if they see this tape, none of them won't mind it, because I've seen Eddie go at it with Chavo, his brother, with Mondo, with Hector, you know. Him and Art used to fight, not fist fight, but go at it every single day, you know. And Eddie, as the whole world knows, has his demons that he's having to fight, and he's fought. And Eddie's another guy who's a tremendous talent. I mean, there's nobody better, and there's nobody that does what Eddie does better than Eddie, and he's just unbelievable. And I know with his recent dismissal from the WWF, he's found himself in that same boat again. And I just hope that he's strong enough to come through and fight his demons and come out on top, because he's a great guy.
Some of the other guys that were in Mexico around the same time, and they've moved on to successful careers. Yeah. Give us whatever you can remember about him in those days. Let's start with Chris Jericho.
Jericho, first time I saw Chris was in Monterrey, which is in the northern part of Mexico. I was supposed to have I think it was a title match against Vampiro, and Vampiro was hurt, so he made the commitment to go to the town, and he'd sit at ringside, whereas I thought I was going to the town to wrestle another face. So once I got there, the promoter told me, oh, you're wrestling Corazon de Leon, which is Lionheart. And I said, who? And I said, Lionheart, that blonde kid there. So I saw Chris, and he was there with another guy called Mike Lewanski, which was, he was wrestling as the Canadian Tiger at that time. Mm-hmm. And they were starting up in Monterey area. And I wrestled Chris. He was a nice guy, and we got along. You know, we hit it off, and it was a great match. It was the first time that we'd worked. And Chris was also another guy that was ambitious, very, very ambitious, because the promotion in Monterey at that time wasn't considered like a major league. In order to have a name and create an image for yourself, you had to work for either Paco Alonso or AAA. And Chris was very persistent in calling the office on a weekly basis in order to come down and start with that promotion, which he did. And I know he won a couple of different titles. I think he won a tag team title. He may have won a light heavyweight title, but I know for a fact he won a tag team title with Dandy. And very creative in the ring. He had the look, you know, blonde hair, good looking kid too. So they had two guys from Canada now, Vampiro and Jericho. And you know, Vampiro, who I've told many, many times, hates himself because he just hates everybody. The only guy that he made like halfway is me. And you know, those two didn't get along at all. And but Chris Jericho, there's no need for me to tell you all what he's doing now and what he's achieved. Another guy who came through at that point was Chris Benoit. He came through, and once again, just a tremendous talent. There's nobody more intense than Chris. And he came through and made a name for himself. But Chris is just a wrestler's wrestler. But the one thing I can say about Chris is that I have so much respect for him, but not as a wrestler, as a man. I mean, he's just a man's man. He doesn't exaggerate. He doesn't lie. He doesn't play around. He doesn't bullshit you. He just tells you the way it is. And in general, he's a quiet guy. And he's made out of the same mold as Finley. He's the same thing. Great workers, but just like a man's man, where they don't play. They just don't play. They're just serious, and great guys. Another guy who came through.
I was going to ask if you ever crossed paths with Owen Hart down in Mexico.
No. But in '96, I think it was, I was trying to get in with the WWF, and they had a taping in West Palm Beach. And I'm sitting out in the hallway with my little manila envelope with my video, my 8x10s in there. And I see the stars going by, Shawn Michael and Goldust and so on and so forth, Ahmed Johnson. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm waiting for somebody to come over, because I'd made my presence known, and they said, okay, we'll be with you 1 second. And all of a sudden I hear, hold on 1 second, I'm just going to say hello to Norman. And I'd never met Owen. I was in Mexico at the same time, but we worked for different groups at that time. And I was aware of him because of the TV and the magazines, which I'm sure was mutual. And he came over, he introduced himself, which I thought was so nice, because he didn't know me, and I just thought it was just a nice gesture on his part. But after speaking to many people who knew Owen and worked with him, he's just a gentleman. I've never heard anybody say one bad thing about him. He wasn't a guy, he didn't do any drugs, he didn't hang out in bars. I don't believe he drank or drank excessively. He was a family man, he didn't play around on the road. Just a gentleman. So I was, that was the only time that I met him. Mm-hmm. As far as Mexico was Haku was there. And Haku is Haku.
You were mentioning the story with Guerrero.
With Jericho. Haku is old school. He was trained in Japan. He was originally a sumo wrestler. Mm-hmm. And he's from the old school, where there's certain things that he doesn't like to be done, or he doesn't like to see inside a wrestling ring. And one thing is that he doesn't like to see. He doesn't like for his opponent to turn his back to him. He just feels it's a sign of disrespect. So one night we're in Acapulco, and I know Jericho remembers this story. I'm sure he still has the bruise on the back of his head. I have Jericho in a full Nelson, and I'm twirling him around, and I'm calling the next spot. I just feel this clothesline in the back of my neck. My chin hit the back of Chris's head, knocked us both out of the ring, and Chris is like, "No, what are you doing?" I said, "Chris, it's that big bastard there. It's not me." My jaw's swollen out to here. But as I said, he's old school, and he's not one of those wrestlers that likes to play in the ring or joke around in the ring. He's serious, and he gives 100% every single match. We wrestled in several towns in Mexico, and I said, his real name is Tonga, and I would say, "Tonga, there's nobody here tonight. Can we just take it easy?" And he looked at me and said, "Brother," I say, "We can't take it easy." So He's from the old school, and once again, he's a gentleman. He really is. He's one of those guys. If a lady comes into a room, he stands up. He'll take off his baseball cap. He's one of those guys where I've literally almost physically had to fight him for him to stop picking up the checks. You go out to eat with him, he's always got that big mitt out there reaching for the checks. So he's a great guy. He's a family man, and he's got a heart of gold. He really does. Who else came through there? There's a couple of guys who passed through. Was it Karen? Who was the Von Erich who didn't wear boots? Kerry. That was Kevin. Sorry, he passed through, and
he was in Mexico City.
Yes,
right?
he wrestled there for a couple of months, but I don't believe he liked it much because it's a very big adjustment. You're talking about a guy whose dad owned a company that he worked for. He was a major star and basically did what he wanted to do. Another guy who came through there was Chris Adams, who I'd met Chris prior to that, working with him in a tournament in St. Louis, and Chris was just Chris. Chris is had a temper, I got along with him fine, but I could see that there was a hot-headed side to him, and I knew that he had a history with drinking too and everything. But and also another loss too. It's just a shame that there were so many premature deaths with all these young guys that passed so soon. Louis Piccoli, Pillman, Art Barr, Chris Adams, who in general are not old guys if they're in their 30s. I mean, that's not old at all. That's in the peak of your life, and you're passing on. It's just not right. But
with all that, I mean, can you say you've learned anything? Can you say why this is happening? I know
what it is, and the few people that knew me prior to me getting into wrestling, I never smoked, I never drank, I never took pills. But in Mexico, you had to do something because you're just wrestling every single night. I mean, every single night. And the accommodations are not the same as here. You don't have the 5-star hotels. You're on a bus for 6 hours. A majority of the time, the rings are like concrete. You're wrestling 10, 12 times with a bad back, with a bad knee, with a bad elbow. And I found myself at one point taking pills to sleep, and which wasn't me. And I would look in the mirror and say, Norman, this is not you. And then you're drinking more. I'll never forget the first time I went to Mexico, and the guys, I mean, they all drink alcohol like it's Gatorade, and which was totally foreign to me, because at that point Vampiro would tease me because I'd be doing my squats and bridges and push-ups and Hindu squats and all this, and those guys pouring a bottle of tequila. And there's a wrestler there called Kato Kung Lee from Panama City, a great wrestler in his day. He was my partner in a particular match, and he wanted me to do a tope off the top rope. And I'm not good off my feet at all. I don't do any topes or mortals or anything. So he said, Amigo, you need to do that tonight because the finish will be better. I said, listen, I don't do it. Please do it. I said, I can't do it. I just can't do it. So he told me, just take a little sip of this. You're loosening you up. So, I took a little swig to be so social. Next thing, I'm coming off that top rope like a big black elephant to catch me. But it's a pattern that you can get caught up in very, very easy. Very easy. And if you're not strong enough to know what you're doing isn't right, you can be caught up in that, and then you're drowning. It's between the drugs and the drinking, and the temptations that present themselves on the road. But I've always felt that I was a determined person, and there's nothing that can have a hold of me if I don't want it to. Besides with women. But the little experience that I went through there, having to take pills to get from one day to another, was just a passing phase. But it's common ground in wrestling. I mean,
you think 50 years from now we're going to talk about this still being the same type of problem?
Of course. Oh, for sure, because 50 years ago, wrestling is not the product what it is now. You don't have Mick Foley jumping off the top of a cage or getting hit in the head 15 times with a steel chair at full force too, or the Hardy Boys or Rey Mysterio doing crazy stuff over the top rope and to the crowd. So heaven knows what's in store within the next 10, 12 years, because the Hardy Boys are just incredible, the stuff that they do, but they're living for today, not knowing what can happen tomorrow. And no one should tell them to tone their stuff down, because if they're creative enough and have the ambition to do it, they should go ahead and showcase their talents. But there is a price to pay, you know. I'm not a high risk guy, but I know for sure that my 4 or 5 years wrestling in Mexico, wrestling on those hard rings and wrestling, you know, each match is a half an hour because it's 3 falls, and wrestling as many times as I did in the week has paid its toll. My neck is very bad. In fact, they wanted to operate on me a year and a half ago, and once they explained the procedure to me, I said, oh, hell no. And I spoke to Bagwell, and I spoke to a couple of the other boys who had some neck problems. They basically told me, Norman, as long as you're able to function, you work out, and you don't have any pain, why take the risk? But just those years I spent wrestling in Mexico, it takes its toll, you know. And the hardcore matches didn't help at all. So,
before we jump into the
yeah.
U.S. side of things, I wanted to drop just a few names to you
Sure.
that's famous with Mexico, and just
Sure.
if you have any stories or impressions. How about Mil Mascaras?
Mil Mascaras was my idol. I used to idolize him as a kid when I was 15, 16. And, you know, when I initially met him, I thought he was a little bit of an asshole. But he's a guy that's been wrestling for years. He's preserved his body, he's preserved his image, he's preserved his name. He's a mega, or was a mega star in Japan. He's done everything that there is to possibly do as far as in the realm of wrestling. He's made movies, he has his own production company. He's a businessman, and you know, he takes care of himself. And at this point of his career, he's not going to take any crazy bumps. I worked with him a couple of months ago in Mexico, and what I'm doing in this chair right now is double what he did in the match. He does absolutely nothing. But then again, you know, why should he? You know, he's got his name. As I said, he's not going to take a backdrop from some kid who's been wrestling for 6 months. That's just not him. But I respect what he's done. I respect him as a man, and after I've had some time to get to know him, I just know the way he is. And if you've never met him, or if you don't know anything about him, just go up to him and ask him, because he will tell you everything there is possibly to know. I mean, he just loves to talk about himself, and he'd be great in an environment like this. So
No, he's worth too much to sit in a chair with him.
yeah, he's special.
How about Connect?
Connect, I wrestled him a few times, and he was one of those guys. Growing up as a kid, I used to read about him and Mil Mascaras and Dos Caras in Pro Wrestling Weekly or whatever it was at that time, and it was a dream to wrestle him. But I don't know him that well. I know that one time he got a little cocky one time with Haku on a TV taping in Arena, Mexico. This was one of those few occasions where they brought their guys over from Minus's group, who was, I forgot the official name of the company, but that's where guys like Silver King and Dandy started in Negro Casas. So we had a joint promotion, and I don't know why guys would pick on Haku, but he tried to get fresh with Haku in the ring, and Haku just held him down twice, and the rest of the guys, Satanico was one, Dos Caras was another, who had to go in there and physically not pull Haku off because they couldn't do it, but just beg him, please don't kill him, because he was going to kill him. And I think Connect knew that if he went back to the locker room, that it was the end. So he literally ran back there, grabbed his bag, and just left. That's a true story. So, as I said, I don't know him that well, but the few occasions that I've worked with him, he's been professional with me. And the funny thing is, my years of wrestling in Japan spread to Mexico. So they thought that I was this big time shooter, and you know what I mean? So I've always felt that what they thought that I could do to them was worse than what I could actually do. You know what I mean? Haku was the one that you had to be scared of, not me. So those guys were all. I never had a problem with anybody in the ring, anybody at all, because they thought that I was this big time, you know, shooter, which is not the case. as Carl Gotchman's told me, because you're just a commercial guy, you don't know shit. So, but good guy, big name in Wrestlico, and a decent wrestler.
Do you have any memories of your matches with Dragon?
Yes, I wrestled him a few times in Mexico. I wrestled him once in Japan, and he's a real pro. He's a great wrestler, great guy, and it really struck me as him being a pro and very professional when I wrestled him in Japan for War at the time, and Tenryu was the owner of Booker at that time, and he wanted me to go over on Dragon, and Dragon was like, no problem, you know. And Dragon, I think he held the 8 titles or 7 titles at the time, and he had no qualms about doing it whatsoever, because he's a professional and he knows business is business, and he's just a great guy. And it was unfortunate that you know, what happened to his elbow happened, because he had so many great years left in wrestling to offer, and it was cut short.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, let's move into your time with WCW in the U.S.
Yeah.
How did you start with WCW?
Well, let me see. I left Mexico in '94. I wanted a break. I basically thought that the 4 years I spent in Mexico, I felt that Eric Bischoff and Vince McMahon had to be aware that there was a guy in Mexico, Black Magic or Norman Smiley, and that they'd be interested. So I figured within a couple of months of me being home that my phone would ring, you know. Within the first week, I was like, did I pay the bill? Because this phone is not ringing at all. And I was seeing a girl, and I wanted to get married, and she didn't. She left, and I can honestly say that '96 was the worst year of my life, because the money I made in Mexico, I was young and dumb and stupid, and Vampiro influencing me in the way that he does. I just went through everything. I mean, I bought my mom a home, but I just spent just for the sake of spending. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have the money that I should have had at that time. So I actually worked a regular job, and that was when I began to watch the wrestling, and that was when the NWO thing started. And they started the Monday Nitro, and Vince McMahon had Raw, so I could just see that wrestling was, you know, was peaking or becoming huge. And as I explained to you before, you know, watching guys that I wrestled with in Japan, in Mexico, in the States, you know, Dean, Chris Benoit, Jericho, Haku, Conan, Rey Mysterio, Hoovy. I just felt that I had something to offer, just like those guys did, and I just felt that I should be there. So after picking myself up and just deciding that I wasn't getting any younger, and if I was going to make a move, I had to do it now, I just decided to train and make some phone calls, which I did, and once again I called Conan, and he was like, "Where have you been?" Because I was missing for 2 years or a year and a half. And you know, I sat him down. I told him what I was going through and what I wanted, and you know, being a friend that he is, he said, "No, I'm going to help you." So I went back in those days. They were doing the Universal tapings in Orlando, and they would be there for 10 days or 2 weeks, and it was an easy setting because you just show up at the studio, and you check the board, and if your name was on the board, you'd work, and if you didn't, you could leave and you go to the beach or go to the park or whatever. So I went there, and I had a tryout match with Johnny Swinger, and it was funny because I remember I was behind the curtains, and I'd wrestled on pay-per-views, and I'd been world champion in Mexico, and many tours of Japan, but I was shitting in my pants. I was just so scared, and it wasn't even a wrestling crowd. It was like 200 people. It was like a studio crowd, but I knew this was a money match. You know, this determined whether I got a contract or I didn't get a contract, and I was just nervous, and Johnny Swinger, God bless him, he did everything that I wanted to do, and the match was a success. And when I came back, I remember Brad Armstrong came up to me and said, "Man, you're good. I mean, where have you been, and who taught you?" And so I knew that the match was that good to impress an Armstrong, because you know the Armstrongs are great. So then I was hired. Conan promised me that he would use his influences to get me a contract before Christmas of '97, and I actually signed it in October. So he's, God bless him. He's a man of his word. So that's how I initially started, and that's how I signed my contract. And what happened at that point in '97, I think there was over 100 guys under contract, and I was taking the stuff that I'd learned in Japan, learned in Mexico, learned in Europe, and just trying to combine it all and present a different package as far as wrestling wise. And believe you me, I could have been standing there stark naked with my hair on fire and nobody could give a damn. It was just, I'm doing all this stuff here and people could care less. So it became apparent at that time that the biggest thing was, this and for life, and the gestures, the sayings, and I was trying to find a niche that that I could create, that I could develop, that would be me. And I had spoken to Scott Hall, who I started with. Well, I started in Florida in '86, and Scott Hall was there at the time, and he basically told me, because Norman, a gimmick is only an extension of the person. Like Ric Flair, that's Ric Flair. What you see on limousine riding, jet flying, that's Flair. That's Flair in the bar. That's Flair, him in the casinos in Vegas. I mean, that's him. Kevin Nash, that's Kevin Nash. That's Big Sexy. I mean, he's cool. He's cocky. He's arrogant when he wants to be. He's charismatic. I mean, that's him. Conan with his Arriba la Raza, that's Conan. I mean, he's from the streets. So I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm not from the streets. I ain't no kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, limousine riding. And I'm basically, I'm pretty sure that anybody who knows me will say that I'm just a guy who's got a sense of humor. I like to play around. I was born and raised in England. I got no rhythm. I may be a brother, but I have no rhythm. I have no rhythm, and I just decided that I had to come up with something, because there became a point where they were releasing a lot of guys, and I was at that point where I know I had to do something in order to keep my job, and I just felt that there was something that I had to offer. And as I said, I used to share rooms with Juventud Guerrero, and we used to travel a lot together. And without getting too specific, I saw him one night in action in a hotel room in Biloxi, I think it was. Anyway, that's where the wiggle was created. Use your imagination on that. So, who is always telling me that I should pay dividends to that? Well, that's your dividends, Hoovy. So, I just thought it would be different and funny and entertaining that if I could incorporate that move into a match. And one night I just said, to hell with it, I'm going to do it. And the weirdest thing in wrestling is if you're working in a packed house and there's 10,000 people or 12,000 people, and you do something for the first time, man, that's the scariest thing that you can imagine. Because you're like, what is he doing? And you could hear a pin drop. So I'm doing this thing here. And I was actually wrestling Chris Benoit, and Chris, as I said, he's not a humorous guy in that sense, and he's just got that tooth out. Like, what are you doing? Bam, 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 headbutt. But I got back into the locker room, and Terry Taylor, who, I mean, he basically would tell me, like, Norman, today everybody knows wrestling's fake. Everybody does know. You don't have to. You don't have the job today of trying to convince the crowd that wrestling is real. So go out there and have fun, So when I came back in, he came up to me and says, "Norman, what was that you were doing out there?" And I said, "Well, I'm riding a horse, And he said, "Well, whatever it was, keep doing it. It's hilarious." And that was my green light that he had given me to go ahead and do it. Mm-hmm. So I was doing it. It was getting over. Even the boys were saying, "No, you're crazy," because that's just so far-fetched and outrageous. And I was doing it. And I was doing it. And one day, the first time ever, no, I shouldn't say the first time, maybe the second or third time ever, Eric Bischoff spoke to me. "Stop doing that dance." End the conversation. So there wasn't. Can we revise it? Can you tone it down? Can you do it only once? Can you do it twice? Can you just stop doing it. No explanation, nothing. So we went for a phase where I've always lived in Mexico City. I mean, I'm between Mexico City and Miami. But at that point, I was full-time in Mexico, and I couldn't dance. So Kevin Sullivan, I believe it was Kevin Sullivan who was doing the booking at the time, told me, you can't dance because we're going through this standards and practices thing, and da-da-da, and outsiders couldn't do this. I remember Perry Satin was doing something. Oh, he had the dress on at the time, and you put the dress over the guy's head. He couldn't do that. Rey Mysterio couldn't do his Bronco ride. Conan couldn't do his Arriba La Raza thing there. So they were toning the show down. But those guys were still able to actually work, but just do different variations to what they were actually doing. But I couldn't do it. And, it was very hard to talk to somebody because they would say, it's not me, it's Eric. And Eric, unless you were Hogan, Nash, Hall, or the Giant, you were small fry, he wouldn't talk to you. Mm-hmm. So it must have been 2 months, 10 weeks that I would have to fly in from Mexico each week to Chicago, to St. Louis, to Philadelphia, wherever, and just go there, I would say, to get a free meal because I couldn't work. So I'd go there and I'd eat and hang out with the guys and go shopping. And it was frustrating because I felt that it was getting over, it was entertaining, and I was always told that in the event, Norman, that you should get over, you're going to be held down. And I would say, why would they hire a guy, bring him in, give him TV time? He gets over it and they're going to hold him down. Now, I don't know who was doing the whole holding down, but I thought I was no threat to anybody. To Nash, I wasn't a threat to Scott Hall, to Steiner, to Goldberg. I was just looking to create a little niche for Norman Smiley. And I felt that I was being held back. And I don't know why or by whom. It had to be from the people who were pushing the pins, but for 2 months, I had to fly in each week for Nitro, the Thunders. I could work the house shows and do the wig of it, but to actually do it on TV, I couldn't do it. And it was pissing me off, and I would say something, and their answer was to justify their actions. Well, you're getting paid. And I said, yeah, I'm getting paid, but maybe if I was able to do the dance, I could be getting paid a little bit more in the future, So it wasn't until Vince Russo came, and I don't know if you guys want to approach that part now, or you want to leave for later.
Well, your first, you really didn't get past mid-card status, but, probably your first feud that people remember is against Chavo Guerrero Jr.
Chavo Guerrero,
Can you
yeah.
speak about that feud? Pepe a little bit.
Chavo Guerrero, I don't know how that came about. I just think that Eddie at the time was, I think Eddie was still there, and I believe that obviously he's going to look out for his nephew. So, and at that time, Dean, Chris, Eddie, Perry Satin had strokes, so they would do whatever they want. Not do whatever they wanted, but they were creative and they were hungry and they were ambitious and they wanted to make a name for themselves. And I also feel that they were going through the same thing that I was going through, and they had a fear that they were being kept down and held back and so on and so forth. And even though those guys were making money, once again, who's to say that they couldn't be making double what they were making if they were let go and be and able to do what they wanted to do. So I really can't remember how the feud came about between Chavo and myself. But I do remember the time that I put Pepe through the wood chipper. That was actually Chris Jericho's idea, because I was standing there when Chris Jericho pitched the idea. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. It was meant for Chris Jericho, because it was either Chris Jericho or Chavo that pitched the idea to the booking committee. And I thought it was funny, but I didn't think that they were going to give it to me. So I got it, and it really helped me a lot. That feud was like the first run of the ladder to establish me there, and I was happy that I had a guy like Chavo who was hungry. He wasn't jealous. He wasn't going to shortchange me in the ring as far as not doing the things that I wanted to do. And he helped me a lot, because he explained to me too a lot of times which the wrestling approach in Mexico, the pace of wrestling there is so much faster. It's not so much time selling. You don't work the hard camera as much. You don't work the cameras in general. So the whole psychology of putting a match together and selling and comebacks and working the people and working the camera, that was all foreign to me, because up to that point I'd really never wrestled here in the States to that extent. And so travel helped me a lot. I mean, and I thought the thing with Pepe and the wood chipper was just hilarious, and the cake thing and everything. And it was a learning process for both Chavo and myself, because I think too, up to that point, he had really never gotten a break either. So it was something new for the both of us. The benefited the both of us. It was mutually good. So I was happy for that.
You had mentioned that Chavo didn't shortchange you in the ring.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that comes to your mind when you think of that phrase? Is there anybody that you felt like didn't let you get over in the ring?
Yes.
Can you say any names without getting in trouble?
Yeah, because I like the guy. I really do. In fact, let me give you a little story beforehand.
Right.
This guy and I, we sit down in catering together and we talk, and I sincerely like the guy. But once I had to work with him, it was like, holy mackerel. And I thought it was me on the first night, because I thought I was a little off or something. And Vampiro had a problem with him. Crowbar had a problem with him. Any guesses?
It's a hardcore guy, maybe Knobs or Funk.
No, Big Vito.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of friends who work with him in Puerto Rico. And I shouldn't say he'd shortchanged me. He just wanted to do things his way. And he'd say things to me like, Norman, that wiggle thing you do is not over, so don't do it tonight. It's like, what are you talking about? It's like, Vito, you can give me
my offense. What are you doing?
Yeah, but the guy's a great guy. I love him to death. During the time that the company was being sold, I called him a couple of times because I was concerned that if he was still getting paid, if he still had his contract. So, and I just recently saw him in Milwaukee for the loop that we did up there with the XWF, and it's just that he's a perfectionist and he envisions a match his way, and I believe that to a certain extent he's one of those guys that believes the hype. Mm-hmm. But once again, I love the guy. He's a great guy. We sit down, we talk. But he had a problem, which I'm sure you heard about, with a guy called Dresden, where he just flew off the handle and throwing chairs in the locker room and so on and so forth. But he's just a perfectionist. That's just the way he is. He takes it very serious, and he wants to put on the best performance that he's able to. And as far as anybody else, I could say that there were maybe top guys that didn't want to exert themselves because they were a top guy.
Did you ever work Goldberg?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Bill, my first love is tennis. I like to consider myself a tennis player. I'm not as good as I think I am, but I do play, and I play at the same club at times where Bill's father plays. He's a big tennis fan too. So I got to know Bill's dad very, very well. He's a very intelligent guy. In the short time that Bill has been involved in wrestling, Bill's father has made it a point to learn everything that he possibly can about wrestling. And sitting there and talking to him, I mean, he tells me things that I wasn't aware of. So, but Bill is one of those guys where he's one in a billion. I mean, how many guys in the history of this sport can literally not be involved in pro wrestling, buy a pair of boots, and within 1 year wrestle in front of 40,000 people with Hulk Hogan and go over? Mm-hmm. Bill Goldberg, period. There's nobody else. And Bill is very protective of his image, and I don't know if it's because it came to him easy. When I say easy, I'm not taking nothing away from Bill. I'm saying easy in the sense that he didn't struggle like 95% of the guys did. And it's not his fault, but a majority of the guys had to struggle working indies for $20 or a warm beer, or, hey kid, this is good experience for you, so make a 6-hour drive and wrestle for nothing. So he he's protective of his image. I know he's very, very good friends with Rick Steiner, who's been around for years and years and years. So you're not going to pull the wool over Rick's eyes. And so the one time I wrestled him, I knew exactly what it was. I wasn't going to wiggle. And to tell you the truth, I wasn't even going to insult Bill and ask him if I could do it because, I mean, it just wouldn't have gotten over. I thought because Bill is one type of wrestler, and I'm another. But I can tell you one thing: standing in the ring and watching him come down, and there's 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 people screaming, "Goldberg, Gold, brother!" You say to yourself, "Thank God this isn't work," because believe me, there is nothing more impressive just seeing his silhouette just there, and he's spitting and he's throwing punches. It's just, it gives you goosebumps. It's just amazing. It's one of those things that I'll never forget. And I can always say, "Hey, I wrestled Bill Goldberg for 12 seconds." So, a guy who was very professional when I wrestled him, and it surprised me that he gave me as much as I did. And when I even hinted at the fact that, do you think we could squeeze a wiggle right after that hip toss? Whatever you want, Norman, no problem. Do whatever you want. Was Lex Luger. Right. And I know that over the years, Lex has got a reputation as being a prima donna or not doing this or not doing that. But you're not around this business for as long as Lex is, or Ric Flair, or Hulk Hogan, or Macho Man, without knowing something. You're not stupid and be on top for 20 years. And sometimes it's a little intimidating when you have to wrestle, a star, and you want to get all your crap in, wiggle and this and that. And the one time I wrestled him, whatever I wanted to do, he basically let me call the whole match. And him and Buff Bagwell were very, very tight, and Buff was sitting there, and even Buff was like, "You can let him do the wiggle." So, Lex, I love you for that. But it was great, and it was a great match, and easy as pie. And, I found a newfound respect for him at that point, because I had heard many, many times that he was, you couldn't work with him, he wanted to do things his way, and so on and so forth. But that particular night with me, he was a pro, so.
I don't know if there's many other people that would probably say thank goodness Vince Russo showed up. Yeah. But it's kind of a lead into the latest gimmick, the screaming Norman.
Oh,
hardcore.
Let me tell you, I was in Denver, and him and Ed Ferraro, they pulled me aside. Now you picture me. I'm sitting there. Now I'm supposedly this wrestler from Japan and Mexico and everything. Norman, Ed Ferraro, Vince Russo, we got a great idea for you. We're gonna put you in the hardcore division with Knobs and Bam Bam Bigelow and Haku. I'm saying this to myself. I'm like, okay, and we really want to push you in that division, and we're gonna make you the champ. The more they're talking, the more I'm baffled. We're going to give you a character where you think that you're the toughest guy on the face of this earth, and but you're not. And each time that you have a match, you're going to dress up, if it's in football, a football outfit, or hockey gear, or karate outfit, or whatever. And at this point, my self-esteem, I'm like this in the chair. I'm like, I can't believe this. And he says, Norman, to top it off, we want you to scream. Now, I'm thinking that this is some kind of rib. There has to be a camera. There has to be, because everything that a professional wrestler is supposed to do in order to be a wrestler, they're asking me to go against the grain and do totally the opposite. So the one thing I was grateful for, that it took time out to come up with a character and an angle and so on and so forth. But the screaming Norman thing, to tell you the truth, I hated it. Hated it. My first opponent was Horace Boulder, and he's working me over, and I'm screaming, and I felt like an asshole. I'm on the mat. I'm like, I'm on the mat, and I forget who the referee was, but the referee, you gotta You gotta scream louder. Yeah, scream louder. No, no, no. I hated it. I got back in the locker room and the boy saying, "What are you doing now?" At the office. I'm just doing what I'm told. That's all. I want to keep my job. So it wasn't until I would say a month later, and I was working matches. I worked Bam Bam. I worked Knobs a couple of times. Jerry Flynn, and I'm at the Target Center in Minneapolis, and I'm in a handicap match with Haku and Barbarian. And I go back to Mexico with Haku, and I'm in the ring there, and he's working, big chops and everything, and the place is screaming my name just like they scream Goldberg, and Haku, brother, I guess you're over now, And I'm thinking to myself, this thing is actually working. I couldn't have been more surprised, and I left the match, and it was a deal where they took me out on a stretcher, and I came back in, and I ended up beating Haku and Barbarian to go to the finals in the tag team in the hardcore tournament in Toronto with Knobs, and I was just flabbergasted because I couldn't believe it. I mean, people were laughing, but as long as there's a reaction, if they boo you, if they laugh, if they clap, as long as they're doing something, as long as they don't do this, that's what a wrestler wants, a reaction. So I was just flabbergasted, but I knew with that character that there was very little room for me to move up, because I know I would never wrestle Sting. Sting, can you see Sting feeding up for the Wiggle? Goldberg, Ric Flair, Hogan. So I knew that it wasn't something that was going to take me to the top. But for that point in time, it would secure my job, which was important to me at that time. Another thing I wanted to touch on was I got my train of thought. What was I saying?
I was going to ask you how expensive does it get to go to every town and have to buy the athletic jersey?
I got that for free. It wasn't expensive for me. It wasn't expensive for me at all. Oh yeah, this is what I want to say. As far as just taking the screaming Norman thing initially, I just felt that I could do what maybe Triple H did, because when he started out, he was like the Lord Hunter Hearst Helmsley with the bowing and this and that. And you look at him now, and you look at his character back then, it was totally different. And to tell you the truth, I hated it. I mean, I detested the character. And I remember one night in Toledo, Ohio, I was talking to Chris Benoit, almost in tears, because I just felt at the time that people were laughing at me instead of with me. And Chris said to me, God bless him, he said to me, "Oh, Norman, I think you're the only guy that could pull off that thing there like Chris. Any fool can do it." He goes, "No, brother, I couldn't do it." So he was trying to pick up my spirits and everything. But I just hated it. I just hated it. And I would talk with some of the established guys, the veterans. I spoke one night with Hacksaw. And he said, "Norman, as long as you're on TV and you're getting paid, that's the only thing that matters." Steve Regal. He goes, "Norman, you're getting paid." You know what I mean? There's a bunch of guys that sit back there every night, they're not getting paid. They're worrying about getting released. They bought a new home, they bought a new car, they got to worry about that. At least you're working. So when I looked at it from that point of view, I was like, you know what, Norman, you got a lot to be grateful for. And that's when guys really started to fall. They were just, cutting guys like Horace Bowler went, and Virgil, and Jerry Flynn, and Knobs. And I'm like, wow, thank God for this Screaming Norman thing. I love it. So, it just it enabled me to keep my job.
How do you feel about it now? I mean, you're still using this gimmick on the independent scene pretty successfully.
I take it for what it is. It's a character that's entertaining. It's what's paying the bills now, so I can't belittle it. It's entertaining. I mean, it's entertainment. Pro wrestling is me being in the ring with another guy or three other guys and entertaining whoever's sitting in the chairs. So if I have to scream to do it or do the wiggle, it's entertainment. That's all it is. So I've come to terms with it. I've accepted it, and it's good. It pays the bills. So it's a good thing, Dallas Page. That's a good thing.
I'm going to say you did observe a few things in your time
Yeah.
in WCW. You mentioned that you were present at the Jarrett Hogan.
Yes, I was there. I actually wrestled Big Vito, which he called the whole match, but that's a different story. But there were rumblings backstage that something was not going to happen, or was going to happen. And, Hulk Hogan's the man. I mean, he's the man. So it was determined at that point that he didn't want to put over, I guess it was Jarrett. But the office had plans of putting Booker over, which I thought, from a wrestling standpoint, that if you went to the average mark on the street and told him, Hulk Hogan won the title last night, or regained the title last night, they said, so. But if you went to the average person and said Booker T won, it's really, who's Booker T? At least there was some kind of interest there. So I just felt at that time that it was the best thing for business for Booker to win it. Plus, it would have been the first black champion since Ron Simmons. I don't know who won it before that. I guess it was Ron Simmons. It was the
I think he was
first
the
one.
first world champion.
Yeah. So I just thought it would have been better for business if Booker had the title. So apparently Hogan refused that. He exercised a clause that he had in his contract that he has creative control of his character, and he wouldn't do it. So I believe that after the verbal fight that they had backstage, that when he initially was going to the ring, that he thought that he was going over clean on Jeff, and when Jeff laid down, I'm sure he just felt gutted. His heart just sank. So as the whole world knows, he went over to Jeff Jarrett and pinned him 1, 2, 3. And I didn't actually see him come back, but I know that when he came back, it was said that he was just pissed. And he was there with his son and some friends, and he gathered his stuff, and he took his kid and just stormed out. And that's when Vince Russo went out there and did the shoot deal in the ring, and which at that point I felt it was a work, because you didn't know, because everybody was trying to come up with something was supposedly a shoot, but it was a work in order just to boost the ratings. So at that point, I felt it was just another one of those things that they came up with at the last second, or maybe it was something that they gave a lot of thought to, and that Hogan was in on, and Jeff Jarrett was in on, and maybe Booker too. But it turns out, and who knows, there's only a couple of guys that know if it was a shoot or not, but apparently it was the real thing, because I'm not the best of friends with Jeff Jarrett, but I pulled him aside and asked him, and he said, yeah, it was a real thing. And I asked him if he had any concerns while he was laying there, if he thought Hogan would take a field goal kick at him or something. And Jeff looks at me and he said, "No, man, I had both eyes on him." So it's hard to determine whether it was real or if it was planned or whatever. But I just felt that it was better for business if Booker had it. And I was on the card that night, and I made it a point to wait for Booker after he won the title to come back to congratulate him, because I know it meant a lot to him, and he was like a kid in a candy. So he had that belt backstage there, and he was just happy. So I know his dream had come true, and he went on to win it a couple of more times, I believe. What, 4 times or 5 times? He does this. I know. What does that mean when he does this? Anyway, I don't watch as much wrestling as I should, but I think he won it a couple of more times. But I just felt, as I said, that it would have been better for business. But Hogan had his plans and his ideas why he didn't want to do the job. So I can't speak on.
There's a lawsuit against WCW, or there was. I don't know if it's still pending, a discrimination lawsuit against minorities.
Yeah.
As a minority yourself that worked for the company that was part of the lawsuit,
Yeah.
do you have any comments about that?
Being a minority and being, but I had the double whammy, because I was and black, okay, and I lived in Mexico, so like, well, the black guy lives in Mexico, so I'll put him with the Mexicans. There was definitely racial slurs being thrown around, sometimes in jest, sometimes with some spite behind them, and it was always says that the office was like the good old boys, and that they would keep down the Mexican guys, that they would keep down the blacks, that they would make it a point to make sure there was only a limited amount of blacks there. When I signed my deal in '97, October of '97, there was over 100 guys there, and there was myself, Stevie Ray, Booker T, the Cat, Virgil, Hard Work, Bobby Walker. That was it, I think. There was like maybe another guy, but I'm talking about guys that had contracts. They had a couple of guys that would come in and do jobs, but guys that had deals, there was maybe 5 or 6 guys. So you're talking 4, 5, 6% of the office that they had were black, and then they brought in the Mexicans, and I guess they had an ulterior motive there because they were planning to do shows for Latin America, so they needed Mexican guys, and once that deal fell through, they got rid of those guys like there was no tomorrow. They just and just kept the guys that got over, Hoovy, Psychosis, Ray Ray, and Conan, and the rest of the guys were gone. I felt a lot of those guys had a lot to offer. Hector Gaza, Lismark, La Parker, Dandy. Sure, maybe they couldn't become a Bill Goldberg, but there was something that they could offer. There was something that they could bring to the table. And I feel from a personal standpoint, yes, there was some racism there, but we live in America. And wherever you work, in Burger King, I could be sweeping the streets, you're going to find it there too. So it was something that, and plus, speaking from my standpoint, being born and raised in England, that was something that I really didn't, I really wasn't aware of as a kid until I came here. I'm sure it existed there, but it wasn't something that I had to contend with growing up, because I was a minority in a big way. I think I was one of maybe 20 black kids in my high school in England, and it was something that I didn't have to contend with. So it was something that I didn't notice until I came to the States, and then you realize, even amongst blacks, the lighter skinned blacks are racist against the darker skinned blacks. You know what I mean? It's just it's one of those things. And same thing happens in Mexico too. So
I was going to ask you about Mexico because I actually went on a trip,
yeah,
and I brought a good friend of mine who's black,
yeah.
and I never felt like I had so much attention in my entire life in Mexico. I was going to ask you.
No, and you know what? In Mexico, I've never found not even one iota of racism. Never. I've gotten heat for a lot of things, but I don't think for being black there. I feel that I had a conversation one time with Pistol Pez Watley, okay, and he was putting up the ring and driving the ring truck, and he told me that he was trying to get onto the booking committee, and he was very, I guess he was hurt to some degree, because he told me, because Norman, I got just as much experience as those guys. I've been wrestling, I think he told me, for 24 years or 25 years. And, I've been doing it just as long as Terry Taylor, Arn Anderson, Kevin Sullivan, Jimmy Hart, and he was never given a chance, not even a chance. So, he was upset, and rightly so, because he'd been involved in the company for many years. He was never given a chance to prove himself as far as having a creative mind and being able to contribute something in the booking. So, he felt that he was given the short end of the stick, and rightly so. I know that there was another, and I'm not going to mention names because, and I know that there was another major black star, who felt that he was getting messed around because he felt that a guy of his stature should have been getting. His deal was that he wasn't getting a Cadillac in his rental agreement, in his contract, and he said, they give for the white guys. Paige has one, Lex has one, this guy has one. So, he felt that it was a kind of a racism thing there too, and there were certain guys there that I felt that weren't too friendly towards me in general, and I don't know if it was a racist thing or not, but. When you say hello to somebody and they just look the other way, how are you supposed to take that? And you do it 3 or 4 times and they don't acknowledge you. It's like, well, to hell with him. So, but definitely, and I think that the lawsuit is warranted. I was asked to get involved in it, and it's ironic that the guys that were putting the lawsuit together were the guys that were released. So, I had my job at that time, and the Screaming Norman thing was getting over, and maybe some guys would call me an Uncle Tom or whatever. But the bottom line is this: is that I had a job. I just signed a new deal, and I was happy with my contract, and I didn't want to mess it up. So.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, in conclusion, but definitely there was racism there. There were many guys who came through there who should have been given more of a chance. And I'm not saying they should have been given a chance because they were black, but in the same breath, they shouldn't have been held back because they were black either. So,
Mm-hmm.
so there was a big racism presence there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I appreciate your honesty,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I understand your position.
Yeah, because I still like to wrestle a few more matches in my career. So
Well, let's talk about how things are going right now.
Yeah.
You're wrestling on the indie scenes, and it's a little tough right now with only one game in town.
yeah, it's you know what's funny was that when Vince McMahon purchased the company. Let me back up a little bit.
Sure.
One of the downfalls I felt of World Championship Wrestling was the waste in money. As I said, I was living in Mexico, and they would fly me in. There was a particular time where the angle was where I didn't want to be hardcore champ, which was a shoot. That was, I would tell them, like, guys, I've been doing this now for 8 months, and I'm getting banged up. Knobs is killing me. Can I move on? It's like, we'll turn it into an angle. Like, no. I really went out of it. So they turned it into an angle, and they figured that they could revamp the whole idea and give me Ralphus. And the deal with Ralphus, as you well know, he was originally with Jericho, but he was a sidekick to Jericho. That was the difference. He never actually got involved in the matches with Chris. With me, I was involved in the hardcore. Wrestling with Knobs, Vito, Haku, Barbarian, Terry Funk, and they would actually give him physical things to do in the ring. Now, you don't have to know Ralphus. All you got to do is just look at him, and you can tell he's not an athlete. He's a man in his late 50s. He's not in the best of shape. No athletic ability whatsoever. And I'm sure he wouldn't be upset by me saying that. So he's in these matches, and he's just getting pounded to death. Just pounded. I mean, beaten up. I remember one time in St. Louis at the Dome, he messed up the finish, and Terry Funk just got pissed and just bam, 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 bam. I get back in the locker room, and just got poor Ralph has got blood coming out of his ears. Coach has got the light coming through his eyes like this here. He didn't know where he was, and I just felt that there was going to be a casualty with him. So as I was saying, there was one point where I didn't want the title. And I had lost a match where if I lost a match, I was fired. So they did a deal where they wanted to do a thing where I was going to wrestle these backyard wrestling alliances for kids. So they'd fly me in from Mexico City to Atlanta. We go to one of the producers' homes or directors' homes, and he would get the local kids in the neighborhood. They put up a little makeshift ring, and I'd wrestle the kids, take the belt, and leave with Ralphus. Now the angle was that I would accumulate 4 or 5 of these belts, go back to Eric Bischoff and say, hey, I'm hardcore champion of this neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia, and this neighborhood in El Paso, Texas. But what had happened was, we did one, it was fine, which aired. We did another one. Now they're flying Ralphus in from Orlando, they're flying me in from Mexico City, they're flying this guy in from there, they got makeup guy, they got the camera crew, they got catering. They're having to pay all these people because they're working on the weekend. And the second one we did, it didn't air because a higher up decided that it wasn't good for a professional wrestler wrestling with kids. It sent the wrong vibe out there. Another time they flew me in again, but they forgot to tell the camera crew. So all this money that they're wasting, bringing in guys, limo service, catering, as I said, And guys, and the biggest waste was guys sitting at home making $300,000-$500,000 a year. And once again, I'm not going to mention names, but I know specifically there were certain guys that were sitting at home making tons of money. And you know, I had a discussion with Hacksaw, and Hacksaw was telling me after he had his bout with cancer that once he was ready to come back, you know, he was waiting for them to call him. And you really get spoiled. I mean, you get a check that's coming in for 5 figures every 2 weeks, and you have to do absolutely nothing for it, only to walk to your mailbox, open it up, and deposit it. Then all of a sudden, you know, you get a phone call that say, okay, Norman, we want you to make an appearance in your hometown. It's like, son of a bitch, you want me to go and work? You know. Meanwhile, you've sat at home for 2 months doing absolutely nothing. You get spoiled. So towards the end there, when it was rumored that the company was going to be sold to TriStar, and then it was going to be sold to another company, then Eric Bischoff was trying to get some backers for him to purchase it. I wasn't involved at that time. But I heard through several wrestlers and reading the stuff online that Shane McMahon said that everybody would be given a chance to prove themselves to keep their jobs. Well, I wasn't given a chance. You know, I know Big Vito wasn't given a chance. I know Vampiro wasn't given a chance. Conan, Juventud, Rey Mysterio, Psychosis. There's the list. Believe me, the list of guys that wasn't given a chance is so much greater than the guys that were given a chance. And I feel that even the guys now that are in Cincinnati with Les Thatcher, the Mike Jinjak, Mike
Sean O'Hara.
Sean O'Hara.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, Sean. I'm sorry, Sean O'Hara and Mike. I can't remember his name.
Mike Gendry?
No, the commentator, the guy that talks.
Mike Tenay?
No.
Oh, Mike Sanders.
Mike Sanders. Mike Sanders, Johnny the Bull, and Kaz Hayashi, and Shannon. I mean, those guys are just tremendously talented, and I've never been able to understand what is a stepping stone, and I guess that's why I'm a wrestler, and Vince McMahon is Vince McMahon. What is the stepping stone from going from wrestling from WCW to wrestling on their shows and not being able to produce? Like, I'm sure Kaz Hayashi can wrestle with anybody. Shannon Moore can do it. Johnny the Bull, sure, he's still green, but he's got so much raw potential. Sean O'Hara, I know that he was one of the few guys that actually was given a chance to go up there. He wrestled on Raw and SmackDown, and maybe they saw a couple of holes in his armor and sent him down for some additional training, but he was one of the few guys. I mean, there's only a handful of guys. Hugh Morris, Mike Awesome, Sean O'Hara, Jindrak. There's just a couple of guys that would literally get given a chance. So what I'm saying is now is that when the company was purchased by Vince McMahon, I wasn't there. I wasn't given a chance. But I felt in my heart and soul, because I was told this by several of the guys. Brian Knobs told me, who's worked for Vince McMahon. Haku told me, who's worked for Vince McMahon, said, Norman, your gimmick is perfect for up there. Mm-hmm. And I really felt it from the bottom of my heart. I really felt that Norman, once the company's sold or whatever happens, you know, if Vince has it, you're okay. Mm-hmm. Because I just felt that he would have had me doing the wiggle behind, you know, wrestlers, women, donkeys, mules, you know, parked cars, whatever it would take to be entertaining. And I was surprised when I didn't get a call, so I figured it was something as minor as me just being overlooked. And you know, I called Jim Ross and I sent him a couple of emails, and wasn't there. Once they tell you, you know, call this guy, call back tomorrow, call next week, call that guy, you know. Mm-hmm. I've been wrestling long enough to know when I'm getting the runaround. So, but I just felt that I would have something to offer, and that I would have been up there, but it didn't happen because I just felt I could have been put in the same mold as Grandmaster Sexy. You know, I forgot his partner's name. I'm so bad. Scotty Tuhati, or even Rikishi, mm-hmm. or even the other black guy there that K Quick, is it? Or
yeah, he's not there anymore.
Yeah, well. Well, there's room for Norman. So I just thought that there would have been room up there for me, and maybe a decent position. And now with the rumors that they're going to split the company soon, I'm going to try again. But I'm keeping active. I work in Mexico. I'm involved with this new group called the XWF. Also involved with the WWA, which is which is owned by a guy called Andrew McManus. We just did a tour of Australia and England, and we were scheduled to go to Argentina, but due to the recent money problems they're having there, as much as I like to travel, I don't want to go there and wrestle and not get paid.
Right.
So that trip was cancelled. But they supposedly have a pay-per-view that's scheduled for next month from Vegas, and the pay-per-view that they did from Sydney, Australia, aired here in the States. And I think in general it was received very, very well. Obviously there's some niches that they need to work out, because it's it's the first time that they've done it. It's the first time a lot of the guys have worked with each other as far as behind the scenes and technicians and so on. And the potential is there. And I thought that once I knew that I wasn't going to be picked up, that I may have to hang up my boots and do something else. But the independent work is just coming in. I've spoken to Vampiro. He's busy. He's in Japan. He works in TJ, LA. Conan, he's all over the States. He was with me in Australia and England. He spent a lot of time now in Puerto Rico. So the work is there, and there are so many talented guys that right now that don't have jobs. Buff Bagwell, Jeff Jarrett, Scott Steiner, Stevie Ray. There's just a bunch of guys. So I feel it's only a matter of time before something happens that can group all these guys together, and we can have another good time.
Well, we are running against the clock here.
Okay.
I was going to ask you if you want to have any closing comments, anybody you want to address, anything you want to leave the crowd with.
Closing comments. I just feel blessed that I've been able to wrestle now for 16 years, to make a living at something that I love to do. It's the easiest job in the world. It's the greatest job in the world. You can't really call it a job, because doing a wiggle for 10 minutes in the ring is not working. But you travel. The money's great, and it's just an opportunity to be a star. Which I'm still trying to be. So I'm looking forward to the next chapter in my life, which is this year and next year, which I feel is a big step, because if things don't work out with WWF or another group that's going to come along and sign me, I just may hang it up. But up until that time, I'll